HighLevel has given us yet another exciting feature. Now you can use GET request inside your voice AI agent. Welcome to HighLevel Techie. This is Jitin here, and today I'm going to show you how to get some data using GET request inside your voice AI agent. So let's get started. You are already familiar with how to set up the first screen, so I'm not going into those details. Just give the name and business name and select a voice and such, and then you go into agent goals. This is where you set up your custom actions, and inside the custom action, now you have a new custom action called get request actions. So let's go and see what is custom action or a new action. When you click on new actions, you can find a lot of actions here. You can transfer a call, you can trigger a workflow, you can send SMS, you can update a contact field, book an appointment, and then there is custom action. So if you click on custom action, it opens up a window like this. The exciting part is here. When you click here on post, you can either send a post request or send a get request. So post and get are two methods by which you can either send data or receive data. Post is to send data to a webhook endpoint, and get is to get data from a webhook endpoint. And today we will be discussing about get request, and you can find another video on post request if you look at one of my previous videos. So let's get into get request. So first of all, let's select get request. So if you want to get some information from a system, we can use get request. So one good example is to get appointment slots, the availability slots. We can use get request with that. And you can also get the live exchange rate, live news, live weather report, and such using get request if there is an API available for it. Let me quickly give a call to.
This call will be recorded for quality purposes.
Hey, you have reached HighLevel Techie. How can I help you today?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey there, I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How about you? Anything I can help with today?
What can you help me with?
I can help you with checking calendar availability or getting the weather forecast. Need assistance with either of those?
What's the weather in Sydney like?
I'm checking the weather. Right now, it's overcast in Sydney with a temperature of 19 degrees Celsius. The wind is coming from the south-southeast at about 17 kilometers per hour. Anything else you'd like to know?
How about in Dubai?
I'm checking the weather. In Dubai, it's sunny with a temperature of 38.2 degrees Celsius. The wind is coming from the south-southwest at about 22 kilometers per hour. Anything else on your mind?
Yeah, sure. I also need to look to book an appointment. So do you have any availability?
Sure thing. Could you let me know the date you're looking to book the appointment for?
How about today?
All right, let me check the availability for today and the next 5 days. I found some available slots for you. The earliest is on May 19th, starting at 8 in the morning. Does that work for you, or do you have a specific time in mind?
Do you have anything like in the afternoon?
Sure. On May 19th, we have slots available from 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Does any of those work for you?
Yeah, that sounds great. So yeah, thank you so much for the information. All right, so that is the call. You can see my agent is looking for the live availability in a calendar. Okay, so how this is done. You can see this is a pretty simple agent just created to test out this get request. And there is nothing much here in terms of prompting. You can see this is background is as it is, and instruction is also from the standard instruction that we have to make sure that the tools are running properly. And this is the only place where I have added a little bit of prompting. And this is the part of the prompt where it takes care of the availability. To understand this, we first have to look into the custom action, which is get available slot action. So I'm going to click here and it opens up this custom action, and the action name is get available slots. And this action should run when the user asks about the calendar availability and what to say before executing this action. So I'm using this specific word here so that I know whenever this tool is running. So I'm running this tool to find availability for you. You might have heard that during the conversation. So that's when you know that this tool is running. And the most important part is here, the API details and the endpoint URL. And we are using the GET request, like I mentioned earlier. And this is the URL that we are using to get the calendar availability. So now the question is, how do you know what to use and where to find these details? And the information that you need to find can be found under GHL's API documentation. So here we are under the calendar folder, and inside calendar folder, click on calendars. And the first one, get free slots, is what we are using. So you can see get free slots. The URL that we need to use is here. And this gives you the availability between two different dates. So that's why we need a start date and end date in this case. And if you look at this URL, what we are doing is that we are copying and pasting this whole URL. But instead of this calendar ID, we are actually giving a specific calendar ID. So if you go back, you can see here, the URL is here. And instead of the calendar ID, I have given my actual calendar ID and then / free slots. So that's the first part where you use the URL. And now we require certain parameters inside our request body. So you can see calendar ID is required, which we have already given inside URL itself. And now what we need is the end date and the start date. So because the free slots looks for a date range, you need to provide the start date and end date. And when you look closely to the end date and start date, it has to be in Unix timestamp in millisecond. So that's something you have to take care during the process. And once you have end date and start date, what you need is an authorization and an API version. So for the authorization, you have to create a private integration token, which you can find in one of my previous videos. So you create a private integration token with the scopes of viewing and editing the calendar. So once you generate a private integration token and you have the API version, which is given here, you can go back and add those things here: authorization, bearer space the token, and accept application /JSON. The version is this as given in the documentation. So that takes care of the header part of the request. And then now we come to this part where we have to specify the variables. And the variable here is the start date and end date, because you can see here, these are the two variables that we require: start date and end date. And to find start date, the prompt we are going to give is get the date from the user. If the date is not provided, then get current date in Unix milliseconds. And the example would be a string like this. The end date would be a date, so that we have a date range. So in this case, I'm looking for 5 days from the date the user asked, so that I can give an availability between those 5 days. So the prompt for that is get the date, that is 5 days from the start date in Unix milliseconds, and the string and the example is here. So this is the setup that is required to create this GET request. And now if you want to save this request or save this action, you have to test this webhook. Otherwise, you cannot save this. So you have to test it and you have to get a success. Then only you can save this action. So let's click on this test webhook. Then it would ask you to initialize with sample data. So I'm giving the start date as this and my end date as this, and click initialize action. Then it would run and it would give a response back if everything is all right. Otherwise, you will see failed and with the error code, but in this case you saw success. If you haven't seen it, let me run this again and click initialize action, and then you can see status is success. Otherwise, you will see status has failed and the response code for that. Now, depending on the result that you get, you might get a lot of different things here. So in this case, you can see the availability is on 19th May. So that's why it is coming as results.this. So these are all coming from a JSON structure, and the top level of the JSON structure is results. So if you select results, whatever inside that JSON would also be get captured. So I'm only going to select results because depending on the date, these things will change, but results will not change. Results will always be the biggest container of the results that we receive. So that's why I'm selecting results and not the individual containers. So once I've selected this, I can click save and this action will get saved. So that's all you need to set up to get the appointment values from a calendar. So one thing you need to remember, this is going to be a static calendar because we are giving a specific calendar ID. If you want multiple calendars and such, you probably have to create multiple custom actions and prompt it accordingly so that it selects the right custom action to run. Okay, so we are not going into that. You can also check out my previous video on how to use multiple calendars. That will help in that case. So we have got available slots. We have created that action. Now, if you go back to the prompt itself, you can say find start date by getting required date for the appointment, because the user has to tell that I need an appointment today or tomorrow, then only we can capture the value in Unix. Or if they don't tell anything, we can assume that they want appointment from today. So we can use the current date and find its equivalent Unix time in milliseconds. So that's the first part of the prompt. And now the second line is once you get the start date, we want a date range of 5 days. So that's why we are adding 5 days to the date and then creating an end date based on the start date. So you can change that to any number you want. If you want to look at only 2 days, you can change that to 2 days, or if you want longer, you can change that as well. And now we want to run this tool only when we get the start date and end date. Without these two dates, we cannot run this tool. And if the tool is running, it will end up in an error. So that's why we are adding the third line. This is important to gather the free time slots. So run the get available slots, which is the action name or the tool name, only after you figured out the start date and end date in Unix milliseconds. So we don't want to run this tool without knowing the start date and end date in unique timestamp. That is the third line of my prompt. And then we also want to make sure that the start date and end date is available to the agent. So this is not necessary, but I just added this during my testing. Sometimes it was not working, but I think even without this line, it would still run. But to make sure that it runs smoothly, I added that make the start date and end date available inside the prompt so that the agent can capture the start date and end date without any issue. So that's the only setup that I have for getting availability. You can see there is nothing else in my prompt. This is everything that I have in my prompt. And then you also saw the weather forecast, which is pretty easy. So if you are planning on using any other API endpoints, this is an example how you can do it. So if you see here, this is another custom action with the get request. So if you click open here, the action name is get weather, and this should run when the user asks for weather forecast. And you might have heard I'm checking the weather multiple times. So when this tool is run, I want to make sure that this tool is running. So that's why we have a specific sentence like this. But if you prefer not to have anything, you can just simply add a space and save that as it is. So the AI would generate some sentence while running this tool rather than having a static sentence told over and over again. But this is for me to test what is working and what is not working. So that's why I have this sentence here or in my previous action as well. So now comes the important part, the API endpoint. So if you search for free live weather APIs, you can find a link like this. So that's what I have used here. So there is a URL, and then you need the API key, and you put that API key. This is not my complete API key, so you don't have to test it out. And now to understand how this works, you have to go and study the API documentation. And in the API documentation, you will find that get request followed by Q equals the location name will give you the weather forecast for that specific location. So that's why we are adding the name as Q, and the value that we need to capture is the location. So in this case, this is London. And then if you run this request with Q equals London, you get results. So you can see this is a very good example that if something is wrong, you get the status as failed because my API key is not complete. So I'm going to fill out the API key and run this again so that you can see. Now I have filled out my API key, and now we are going to test this webhook. So let me initialize the action with London. And you can see I have results coming in. And in here, if you look at the response or the results, there are so many values inside the big container, the results container. And one is the location, location name, region, country, latitude, longitude, and so many things. But what I'm interested in the current values, whatever comes under results.current container, that's what I'm capturing. If you want to capture like temperature or something, you can specify that, but they are all coming under the current folder itself. So if you're interested in certain specific things such as the current pressure, so you could just select this and capture those values. Or if you are interested in like wind, the wind speed, you can select this and it will only capture the wind speed. But we are capturing the whole bunch of data. So that's why the agent was talking about the wind speed, the humidity, temperature, current condition, and so on. So now you got an idea. So how you can test the webhook and capture the data that is coming from the webhook. And you have seen that these values are available inside the agent, and the agent can talk about these values and give you more details on these values. So with this new addition, with this new update, Go HighLevel's voice AI capability has gone through the roof. But we are still looking for some more features to come in, because for example, like if you go to get contact endpoint, and you can see this is the URL, and if you insert the contact ID here, you can get the details regarding the contact. It doesn't need a variable like we needed earlier. For example, Q equals the location or start date equals that date in Unix and such. It You can directly insert the contact ID in here, but I have tried to do that, but I wasn't able to do it. So if we were able to do that, we could actually pull the values of a contact, and we can get a value from note sections, and we can do so many things. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that with the current setup. I hopefully this is going to change very soon, and we can make this inbound voice call to GHL's Voice AI so much more dynamic and personal. So I'm looking forward to those updates very soon. But for now, I hope this is helpful. You can get appointment availability into your voice AI agent without doing any workarounds. You can straight away use this URL with the calendar ID and start date and end date and make this work for you. If you have any other questions, please let me know. I'll be more than happy to help. That is all for today, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you and bye.